Hello, I'm David Reeves, host of Wonders Without Number. In each episode, we talk about breaking discoveries in science, which reveal that our Creator, the God of the Bible, has left a pattern of His fingerprints throughout the universe. Check out our other resources at davidreeves.com. Sign up for email updates to have encouraging nuggets sent straight to your inbox. Subscribe to our free monthly magazine and like us on Facebook for daily inspiration and education regarding science and the Bible. If we were to examine the fossil record from Canada to the U.S. and beyond, what would we find? And would it add up to what we read in the Word of God? Join us on Wonders Without Number. Welcome to Wonders Without Number. I'm David Reeves, and today we want to inform and inspire you regarding the wonders we find all around us. An infinite number of wonders that point us directly to our Creator, the God of the Bible. Now, you are no accident. I want you to know that you are special, that you were created in God's own image, that Jesus Christ is our Creator and Savior, and that He has a plan for your life. We get a lot of questions about various topics on our social media pages. So let's take a look at this next scientific topic, and then we'll meet our guest. As we stand here and look around us at all of this beauty, we're faced with questions. Today, there's this trend to elevate nature to the level of authority of the Holy Bible. Some even speak of the Bible and the book of nature as if they were created equal. Galileo spoke poetically of the book of nature, and it's true. All of God's creation is like an open book full of wonder. It can be studied to reveal amazing things. But the natural world around us can quickly become our supreme authority. You might say our God. And I would argue that many atheists have rejected the God of the Bible only to place their interpretation of the natural world as ultimate truth. In other words, they study nature and try to make it say what they want it to say. Now, Deuteronomy 4 tells us to be careful, warning, lest thou lift up thine eyes unto heaven, and when thou seest the sun and the moon and the stars, even all the hosts of heaven, shouldest be driven to worship them and serve them. The Apostle Paul, when he was talking to the Romans, mentions people who serve the creature more than the Creator. The natural world around us is beautiful, and it should be studied, but it can't stand when compared to the everlasting truth of the Bible. The grass withers and the flower fades away, but the word of the Lord endures forever. I'm David Reeves. Truly, the heavens declare the glory of God. So here with me today is a friend from Alberta, Canada, who has researched dragon legends, and he's dug up the bones of dinosaurs for years. He's the author of some fantastic books, including one on flood fossils, one on giant animals of the past, and another on dragons. So join with me as we welcome Vance Nelson. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, David. Good to be here.
Absolutely. It's great to have you here today. You just flew in today, is that correct?
Just flew in from Alberta. That's right, David.
Well, that's pretty neat. Tell me just a little bit about yourself and how you got involved with some of these things.
Well, I wasn't raised in a Christian home, and so didn't know anything about Christianity till I was actually 19 years old. Long story short, became a Christian, went off to Bible college, and found out that there were a lot of professors that didn't actually believe in young or six-day creation. And so started researching this stuff and looking at the Bible, and then from there started looking at the scientific stuff. And so took a theology degree and then took a biology degree, and that's where I got into the scientific aspects of it.
Wow, okay. So you were at any time skeptical about the idea that science could ever fit with the Bible? Or you always had this faith in what the Bible said?
No, I was basically spoon-fed evolutionism.
Okay.
All the way up until I was 19 years old. I believe from pond scum we came, to pond scum we shall return. And so no, I did not believe in young Earth six-day creation. I believed the opposite. I believed that, that we came up from the animals and that the Earth was billions of years old. I believed all that. Became a Christian, and then started reevaluating what I was taught. And then, as I said, went off, took a theology degree, then took a biology degree, and then I've spent the last 15 years or so going all around the world and taking a look at the evidence in the world and digging up fossils, taking a look at archaeological artifacts, and seeing that it actually aligns perfectly with the biblical record.
Well, that's great, and I love your research and your work. You do a first-rate job at it. I've had the privilege of participating in some paleontological digs, some dinosaur digs, but you know, there's this common conception that everything we dig up in the fossil record, especially the dinosaurs, proves that the Earth is at least 65 plus million years old, because that's the age of the dinosaurs. How do you respond to that in a nutshell? And I know we're going to get into much more detail as we move forward.
Well, one of the first things I do is take a look at the history of paleontology. So the history of geology and then paleontology. And what you find when you take a look at the history is that most of the founding fathers of geology and paleontology were Anglican clergymen. They did not take a look at things from a secular geologic perspective. They did not believe in the billions of years. They did not believe that fossils got there through vast periods of time. For example, Johann Jakob Schweitzer, and he produced a book called Museum Diluvianum in 1716. And on one of the pages of his books, we see Noah's Ark, and we see a gentleman here and digging up fossils.
Okay.
Well, Museum Diluvianum, loosely translated, is Museum of Noah's Flood. And so he believed that Noah's flood produced most of the fossils. And so most of the early founding fathers of geology believed that Noah's flood produced most of the fossils. Most of the creatures that were buried during Noah's flood became most of the fossils we see on Earth.
So those left us a record. Those fossils left us a museum, you might say, that we could dig up and we could study Noah's flood.
Right, the fossils left over from Noah's deluge. In fact, what's interesting, shattering the myth of evolutionary terminology, a lot of people look at the so-called geologic timescale or the geologic column, and they look at the names: Cambrian, Ordovician, Silurian, Devonian, Mississippian, Pennsylvanian, Permian, Triassic, Jurassic, Cretaceous, etc. And they say, just take a look at these animals, and this is a record of evolution. Yeah. Well, realistically, many of these names were given by flood geologists, young Earth creationists. Cambrian, Ordovician, Silurian. These were rocks that were originally found in Wales. Cambrian, Ordovices, these were named after the Ordovices in Wales. Silurian, named after the Siluries of Wales. And so when they found similar rocks and fossils elsewhere in the world, they were called the same things, just like those in Wales. Had nothing to do with evolution or millions of years. Devonian. These were rocks that were found near Devon, England. And when the scientists were studying these in Devon, England, they were pontificating about the rocks beneath their feet. When they found them elsewhere in the world, they said, these are Devonian, just like the ones the scientists found in Devon, England. But originally, that had nothing to do with evolution or millions of years. Now, in Canada, we have Carboniferous rocks. But down here in the States, they're called Mississippian and Pennsylvanian because they were first found in Mississippi, Pennsylvania. Place names. Permian, these are rocks that were found near Perm, Russia. Nothing to do with evolution or millions of years. Triassic, of course, tri means three, three-layered or three-colored deposit. Jurassic, 1795, Alexander von Humboldt was fossil hunting in the Jura Mountains, J-U-R-A. He found particular fossils there. Anytime they found similar rocks and fossils, they were called Jurassic, just like the ones von Humboldt found in 1795.
Very interesting.
And so we can go up. Cretaceous comes from the Latin cretus, which means chalky deposits. And so that's all it meant. So the White Cliffs of Dover were famous chalky deposits. And interestingly, up at the top we have tertiary and quaternary or quaternary deposits, literally meaning the third and the fourth. And so why do we have the third and the fourth up at the top? Because originally there was a four-part naming system.
Okay.
Primary were creation rocks, secondary were flood rocks, tertiary were post-flood rocks, and then later quaternary was added, rocks seen forming in the present.
Okay.
So this was all based on a biblical presupposition, a biblical framework. And so they were looking at the real world starting from the Bible.
Okay.
And so, as I mentioned, most of the early founding fathers were young earth creationists, starting their thinking from Scripture. And so that's where we get geology from, biology, etc.
If you were to go to a museum today, a museum of natural history or anything of the sort, you might see that geologic column, and it would be used to push an evolutionary view.
Correct.
Basically, by ascribing dates to each of those layers.
Yes, so what happened was the geologic column was hijacked.
Originally, a biblical principle studying the rocks of the flood, and it was hijacked.
Yeah, most of those names were given by young earth creationists, and they had nothing to do with evolution or millions of years, but it's since been hijacked, and the millions of years and the concept of evolution has been added to it.
Absolutely. And isn't that what we see happening again and again? The enemy tries to take what is a biblical principle or something of God's creation, and he turns it into almost a worship for the created. So today, these atheistic geologists are almost worshiping the rocks from which they think they came from.
Correct.
It's interesting, isn't it?
And what's interesting is many of these geologists, many of whom have PhDs or going in for PhDs, when you bring this up to them, most of them do not know this information.
Wow. So what would be the evidence if creation were true?
Yeah, and that's an interesting question, because when you ask many of the atheists, many of the skeptics, and say, well, wait a minute, if creation were true, what would the evidence actually be? I mean, if you don't know what the evidence would actually be if creation were true, how do you know what you're looking at is actually evidence for evolution rather than creation? And many of them have never actually thought of it. And so you only get the answers to the questions you ask, and if you don't ask the right questions, you won't get the right answers. And interestingly, Charles Darwin knew what the answer would be, because Charles Darwin's only earned degree was in theology. And the answer happens to be right there in Genesis chapter 1.
Okay.
10 times God says that he created creatures to reproduce after their own kind.
Right.
And
today that might fit somewhere within a family level or somewhere.
Yeah, yeah. And so when we're digging up the fossils, digging up the dinosaurs, we say, wait a minute, this is a good test. Is this good evidence for evolution or good evidence for creation?
Okay.
And so
it is not often looked at from that perspective, but that would be a good way to address each issue as it comes along. Let's look broadly and see where it best fits.
Well, let's take a look. Let's go on a virtual dinosaur dig, if you will. But before we do that, here are some scallop shells. Now, if you go on the east coast of Canada, you'll find the people there call them scallops.
Scallops, okay.
Scallops, okay. So here we have fossil, recently living.
Okay.
And what you'll find is when you go on the fossil record, the very oldest scallop looks like a living scallop. And you'll find these evolutionary diagrams, and the evolutionary diagrams are amazing. It's like, wow, look at how scallops have evolved. And then you take a look at the actual scallop shells and say, wait a minute, scallops have turned into scallops. They've reproduced after their own kind. And the very first scallop that appears looks just like scallops do today. That's powerful, positive evidence for creation.
All right, now, if a skeptic were talking with you right now, they would say, but Vance, that's just stasis right there. How would you respond to that? Hi, I'm David Reeves, host of Wonders Without Number. Like what you're seeing? You can find so much more on the Creation Superstore. You'll find over 1,000 books, DVDs, and other quality resources on origin science, creation and Bible history. Whether you're looking for nature documentaries, educational books, homeschool resources, or children's videos, we've got it all, so be sure to head over and check it out. Use this special promo code to receive 10% off your first order.
Well, it's a stasis. That would be powerful positive evidence for creation. That's exactly what we would expect or predict based upon the biblical record in Genesis chapter 1. If God creates things to reproduce after their own kind, the very first time they appear in the fossil record, we would expect them looking fundamentally the same as they do today. We would expect that things would vary because there is variation within the genetics, just like people vary, just like dogs vary, etc. So variation within a kind, but scallops turn into scallops.
Remain scallops. So it's the same concept as we might dig up a horseshoe crab fossil and it looks exactly like, nearly identical to the horseshoe crabs that are still alive today.
Yeah.
You would go to a museum, and I've been to museum displays where they have live turtles on display, and then right next to that they have this tortoiseshell, and they have a big sign that says stasis. Can you believe that for millions of years these tortoises have not changed at all?
Yeah, and a couple of us have come up with almost the same words for this. I call it the name game. Because when you dig up a horseshoe crab from the Solnhofen Formation in Germany, it's called Mesolimulus walchi. But when you find one off the coast of Florida, it's called Limulus polyphemus. And you put them side by side and you say they essentially look the same. Horseshoe crabs have turned into horseshoe crabs. But let's continue on here, digging up the dinosaurs in the real world. So here we are in my stomping grounds in Alberta, Canada.
Oh, nice.
And so what you'll find is the formation name changes when you get into Saskatchewan, it changes when you go down into Montana, it changes when you go into Wyoming. But what do we find? Here's some bones going into the ground, they're getting destroyed. You can pick up some vertebrae. This is a single vertebra. And yeah, thousands of pounds. We hauled out a couple thousand pounds in one afternoon. I'm holding a dinosaur vertebra in my hand. There's some in the bag, some here on the quad. Now we just traveled 12 hours south to Glendive, Montana. Same formation, same bones, different formation name, but same fundamental formation. Hell Creek Formation.
Yes, that's a popular one.
It's a popular one. And a lot of people have gone there, and I've helped lead digs there so that the bones don't go over down into the gully, because the average person doesn't know what a bone looks like. They help dig them out. They think, this is a rock. And of course the Texans help us lead there, and people say, what is this? And they say, that's a leverette. What's a leverette? That's a rock, just leave her out there. All right, so they have humor. And this is one of the oldest gentlemen right here. He was about 90 years old, and he walked to the top and walked back down again. Children 10 years old.
Wow.
And these are some of the academics. Dr. Gary Parker, one of my favorite people on the planet.
Yes,
some people from ICR here.
Absolutely.
Brian Thomas, a good friend of mine from the Institute for Creation Research.
I don't know who this person is, though.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah, we find dinosaur bones. And there are some more dinosaur bones, and there's some more dinosaur bones there, and we don't have time to identify them all. Which we have identified. But what's just as interesting as the dinosaur bones is what we find with them. This is a frill from a ceratopsy, and a dentist was digging out there, and various different types of teeth. We find other reptiles. This is a Champsosaurus vertebrae. And it has a very unique pattern here, which is how we identify it. And here's the ventral side. But we find redwoods. And so there's my first redwood cone.
Wow.
And here are some other redwood cones. Of course, redwoods are still here.
This is in the same formation?
Correct, same formation with the dinosaurs. And here are redwoods from California, same year.
Yes.
Redwoods have turned into redwoods.
Interesting, isn't it?
And here we have some redwood fronds, if you will, some of the leaves. And here are the same type of leaves, Metasequoia glyptostroboides. Now, these particular ones are from China. And so there are the ones from Glendive, Montana. Here are the ones from China. Now, the ones in Glendive match the ones in China, not the ones we find in the United States living today. Now, there's a small redwood.
Wow, isn't that impressive?
Very impressive trees, of course. Willows, we find willows with the dinosaurs. So there's the fossil, there's the leaves, living leaves. Figs, we find figs with dinosaurs. Now that doesn't look like much, but we have these lines. That was before I extricated it from the rock.
Yes.
And there's it after.
Oh, yes.
And lots of figs buried with the dinosaurs.
Okay.
Now here they are, still in the rock. And you'll notice they're completely inflated. And that's telling us something. These were torn off while they were still green. They didn't decay, fall down in season. And so these were ripped up during a great big storm, buried in the mud with the dinosaurs. And so the story starts to emerge. And so redwoods, figs, and here living figs, not saying it's the same species there, but figs have turned into figs. Crocodiles, buried with the dinosaurs. There's a crocodile scute. Alligators, there's an alligator tooth. And alligators, turtles. We talked about turtles. This is a soft-shelled turtle.
Oh, wow.
Now, soft-shelled turtles are still here. So, we have all of these creatures that are still here today, living fossils. They've reproduced after their own kind. That's exactly, precisely the kind of evidence that we would expect to find based on creation, based on Genesis chapter 1.
Okay, now, what about species? Because, Vance, are you trying to tell me that there was a Cocker Spaniel and a Great Dane and a wolf and all of this that God created in the beginning?
I believe that the basic kind was created in the beginning, and these varieties have come out of that kind.
So
now,
it's not species per se?
It's not species, it's the basic created kinds that we're seeing represented here with the dinosaurs.
And each basic kind had a robust genetic sequence that it could adapt to different situations.
Precisely, but that's not evolution.
Absolutely. So what we see some change naturally over time, but that change is not evolution in the slightest. For Darwinian evolution, for universal common descent, you would have to have a single-celled organism gradually evolving. I would say it was an upwards evolution into something more sophisticated, certainly a completely different design, until finally you turn that into apes and then humans.
Right, so we're not seeing increases of information in the genomes. In fact, based on the scientific evidence, we're actually seeing the opposite. We're seeing loss of information in the genomes of populations of organisms. And so, you know, we started out with the information in the genomes, we see variation, but overall there are losses. And so that's the opposite of evolutionism, macroevolutionism.
Interesting. Okay, so if we were to look at the dinosaurs, we've looked at many different types of fossils, including plants and reptiles and all of these dinosaurs, many of them buried in the same formations and the same rock layers. How did they get there? The dinosaurs supposedly lived millions and millions of years. How did the dinosaurs die?
We looked at, the evidence is that they were buried in watery conditions. But let's take a look at the timing. Lance Formation, Wyoming. Let's take a look at this bone here. This is an Edmontosaurus caudal vertebra. So this is a tailbone from an Edmontosaurus dinosaur.
Now, quickly, an Edmontosaurus. Why is it named Edmontosaurus?
Well, good question. I suspect it has something to do with Edmonton, Alberta. But I haven't looked at the history of it, So, obviously named after Edmonton, Alberta. But let's continue here. We sent portions of this bone away for radiocarbon dating. Now, based on the method, this is a good test for old earthism, evolutionism, and biblical creation. If this bone was at least 66 million years old. By the way, they changed the date from 65 million to 66 million in 2011. If it was at least 66 million years old, there should be no detectable radiocarbon left. If, however, it was buried during Noah's flood, only thousands of years ago, there should be detectable radiocarbon left. And based on the test, we found detectable radiocarbon, thus demonstrating that the biblical account is true. The bones were buried during Noah's flood only thousands of years ago. Let's continue. Richard Spur, Oklahoma, claimed to be 280 million years old. We're now getting back to Permian deposits. Here's Captorhinus agouti, supposed to be one of the early Permian reptiles. Here are some of his vertebrae. Here's his jawbone. We sent these away for dating. Again, detectable radiocarbon, thousands of years. Permian rocks, Moravia, Czech Republic. Carbonized wood, detectable radiocarbon? Yes. We're going down through the geologic column. In fact, all the way from Cambrian, all the way up to rocks that are supposed to be 10 million years old, detectable radiocarbon throughout the entire geologic column. And whether it's Cenozoic, Mesozoic, Paleozoic, in other words, from the bottom to the top, approximately the same amount of radiocarbon. So here we go, from the bottom to the middle to the top, detectable radiocarbon. So these creatures at the bottom could not evolve into these creatures, to these creatures into university professors that now teach the theory of evolution, because they all lived and died at approximately the same time. How's that possible? And only thousands of years ago. So the early geologists had it correct. Most of the fossil record was laid down during Noah's flood only thousands of years ago.
They did die at the same time.
They died at the same time. Evolutionism is dead. Old Earthism is dead. They just simply haven't received the memo yet.
Okay, now, very quickly, when you look at carbon-14 specifically, the ratio between carbon-14, decays away in half-lives fairly short in geological terms, which means that if you find any C14 in the sample, then it is only thousands of years old. Now that the age may be a little bit off, but it still proves that it's less than millions of years old. It's only thousands of years old.
Correct.
So finding C14 in all these samples is incredibly powerful evidence that supports a biblical position, the position that says that there was a global flood upon the earth, and it would have sent tremendous amounts of sediment burying all different types of creatures. Now, one of the, you've produced a series of books actually, Untold Secrets of Planet Earth. This particular one, Dire Dragons, they're very high quality, where you compare different types of ancient drawings and inscriptions to dinosaurs that have been found today in the fossil record, and show how they appear to be identical in many cases. Flood fossils, though, you look at many of the things that we touched on today and show how all of the fossil record is such a powerful witness of Noah's flood thousands of years ago, not millions.
Exactly.
So you go around and speak on these issues. You also do a lot of research, because I know, I've talked to you before, but I've also looked at your books. You do a lot of research, don't you?
We do, yeah. We do a lot of research all around the world, also lab tests to verify what we're teaching.
It takes you literally around the world.
It does, yeah.
We appreciate what you do. I want to thank you for being here, Vance.
No problem.
And we're going to have you back on a future episode.
Sounds good. Good to be with you, Dave.
Yes, sir. Amazing information that leads us closer to what the Bible said. You can trust it from beginning to end. Now, we want you to be encouraged and educated as you boldly go forward and you share what you've just learned today. So leave us questions and comments on our Facebook page and give us a call to learn more. I'm David Reeves, and until our next time on Wonders Without Number, I want you to keep looking up. Truly, the heavens declare the glory of God. Hello, I'm David Reeves, host of the TV show Creation in the 21st Century on TBN and the Heavens Declare video series. Each week we talk about breaking discoveries in science which reveal that our Creator, the God of the Bible, has left a pattern of His fingerprints throughout the universe. Engage with other like-minded believers through the Creation Club. This website offers thousands of articles written by scores of authors in multiple languages. Sign up to get our free monthly magazine delivered to your door. Want more? Genesis Science Network is our free 24/7 TV network, reaching millions of people around the world on internet, Roku, Fire TV, and mobile devices. Shop over 1,000 books and videos on the Creation Superstore, the world's largest Origins-related store. Visit our Wonders of Creation Center and sign up for email updates to have encouraging articles sent straight to your inbox. Like us on Facebook for daily inspiration and education regarding science and the Bible.